Welcome back to the Lost in Transit podcast, everyone. I am your host, Spud Grosjean. So as a second part to last week's packing episode, this week I bring to you a list I've been working on for quite a while of travel essentials by some travelers who I look up to. Initially, I'd emailed probably 45 or 50 people, but only got replies from like maybe 15. So I'm going to try and share one from each of them. And then in the show notes, I will share the full list from everyone. So let's get started. I first started following Carl Shakur on Instagram because his photos were just stunning. And I thought since he'd been traveling most of the year, I would hit him up and see what one of his most essential things for travel was. He was delighted to reply, and one of the things that Carl says he cannot travel without is a bottle of sriracha. Imagine loving a hot sauce so much that you take it with you everywhere. That's dedication. Now, Sebastian, if you've seen Sebastian's photos, he goes by Seb Summit on Instagram, you have seen one of his travel essentials, which is an inflatable watermelon slice. He says it was a gift from a good friend, and it reminds him of how fragile life is. He had been together with his ex for more than 11 years before they broke up on a big trip around the world after a year. Since then, he's traveled the world alone, and the melon makes a good photo item. It's an eye catcher if you want. But even better than that, it's a conversation starter. It's a pillow and a mattress on a hard floor if there's not a good place to sleep. Most importantly, it reminds him that he can't take all good things for granted. Even the best things in life can end with a heartbeat or with no warning. Aiden Klemenko, who is a mutual friend with my buddy Roz, who I met on a trip years ago. Aiden lives the van life. Aiden and I have yet to meet, but we've corresponded quite a few times. Aiden said one of his travel essentials is his van. Imagine living a life where one of your essentials is your home. That to me is dedication. Also, if you live in a van, you can still go anywhere. It's great. Now a friend of mine from Portland, Brian, or B-Dorts. Brian does a lot of travel for work. One of the things that Brian had mentioned was an Anchor Power Core, which is a rechargeable battery with USB ports. This was actually on quite a few people's lists that I asked. It's very important for people to stay charged in this day and age, especially for those who use their phones as a camera or maps or anything like that. I reached out to Danny Clinch. Danny Clinch is a music photographer who I have looked up to for years. He's shot some of my favorite bands. He's got some of the most iconic photos from a generation of music that I just adore. So, like I said, I reached out to him. And one of the things that Danny had said that is a travel must is a few harmonicas. I know he plays harmonica in a band. He's been known to jump on stage with some of my favorite bands and play harmonica as well. I can only imagine that during downtimes, he's just blowing into a harmonica in the corner somewhere, enjoying life. Now Heather. Heather is a friend from tour. Heather, I'm not going to say your last name because I'm going to screw it up. Heather has a knack for finding the most outstanding Airbnbs. At the beginning and at the end of tours and on days off, she finds time to stay in these outstanding Airbnbs. But she's also a hiker, and one of the things that she needs to take with her is hiking boots. Now for me, I travel light. I carry one bag. On tour, I carry a second with my laptop and my camera and things that I need. But there's still not space for hiking boots. So I applaud her for making that a massive priority. So a handful of years ago, my brother sat me down one day and we watched a movie called 180 Degrees South. I was blown away. So much so that I bought a photo book, I bought the record, and I started following the guy who is in the movie, Jeff Johnson, on Instagram. And Jeff is a great photographer, but I figured I'd shoot him a message and see if he had anything to add. And he actually replied. I was very, very excited. One of the things that Jeff says, that he takes with him everywhere is a pair of board shorts, no matter the climate. I guess it's good to always be prepared to get wet. Another person who I was rather astonished that replied was National Geographic photographer Amy Vitale. Now, Amy's answers were a little different. They weren't physical objects. They were more personal traits. One of the things that Amy had said was a travel essential for her is curiosity. And if you think about it, we all have that. The reason that we are leaving the house in the first place to go to these countries and see these things is because we are curious. And I feel like that's something that we overlook far too often. And it's so simple. I applaud her for making me realize how important it is to have that curiosity. A guitar tech friend of mine, Kyle Henderson, one of his things was he said he must travel with T-Mobile. That being said, he uses T-Mobile International Service, which, if you have, is free data around the world. Since I switched some years ago, I've only not had service in 2 countries, in Myanmar and Mongolia. If you need to stay connected, T-Mobile is the way to go, in my eyes anyway. The next person is Rob Fenn. Rob is a dear friend who has many ideas. He's always cooking up something crazy, but he's also a tour photographer. But going on the many ideas thing, one of Rob's travel essentials is a leather-bound notebook with a pencil tucked down inside it, so he can write down whatever crazy idea pops into his head. So I was looking at Rome magazine the other day, and I came across an article about a guy who was cycling from India back to England, and his story was really cool, and I thought I'd reach out to him because, that seems like quite an adventure. So his name is Jeremy John, and Jeremy replied. One of the things he said was juggling balls. He says it's a luxury item, yes, but they are small and they can be squashed in his bag. He says he's a big procrastinator and he has a go on them whenever he's waiting for transport or anything. It's good to keep his hand-eye coordination in check, and they're a great icebreaker with the local kids while traveling through remote villages. He says throwing and catching is a universal game that kids enjoy. So some years ago, I started following Kevin on Instagram. He does these insane portraits from whatever remote village in who the hell knows where. But they're outstanding, and you should definitely check out his work. I will link it below. But when I asked Kevin, one of the things he said was a money belt, which seems so cheesy and so, almost geeky. But the description that he wrote along with it is what made it all too incredible. So he says, a money belt that fits down the front of my pants. I use one that is meant to hang around my neck, but instead I wear it around my waist and I tuck it down the front of my pants. That way it is in contact with a part of my body. I will always be aware of any tampering. He says passport and money need to be in plastic to ward off any sweat. Brian Stowell. If you listened to my year in review podcast a few podcasts ago, you heard me talk about my trip to Bolivia with Brian. Well, to Bolivia and Chile with Brian. Now, Brian does do international travel, but Brian does a lot of travel in his car or in a car. So, one of the things that Brian says is he takes a coffee kit with him. He says, after too many trips relying on instant and or gas station coffee, I just wanted to carry good coffee now. At its most compact, it's an AeroPress with a baggie of pre-ground beans. But more often than not, I'm bringing a hand grinder and a scale, fresh beans, and sometimes even a ceramic mug. I applaud his dedication for a good cup of joe. So, as I said, in the show notes, I will link everyone who was mentioned, and I will put full thing they responded with. So it will be kind of a blog post as well. You can email me at lostintransit.pc @gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Lost in Transit PC. Get lost.